Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
All right, hey, how you doing, everybody? Good morning. It is, for all intents and purposes, now Wednesday, April 13th, 2022. It's still time for another show, whether it really feels like Wednesday or not. Of course, today is day 3 of the great spring break junior year in high school road trip to all the various college campuses that are under consideration. Not all of them, but at least, 3 of them anyway. And so back on the road today, so another shortened pre-recorded show just to keep everybody company and to keep you up to date on the things. And of course, these were items I intended to bring you earlier in the week, pushed back a little bit by our fun and exciting surprise live 1-hour show with Greg on Monday. And so today is the only day that you'll actually miss Greg in the live rotation. We'll be back tomorrow, probably exhausted, but back tomorrow for another live show, and Greg will only miss that one beat on Wednesday. Hopefully he has remembered that he's got Wednesday off and he's not sitting there calling in frustration, but perhaps this will tip him off and then he'll say, oh gosh, I'll finish my coffee and then make an appointment with the doctor to talk about why I keep forgetting this. Well, anyway, probably not. He's probably got it all straight. And we'll get you all straight, too, with stories that we have been waiting to tell you, in some cases more than the 3 days. But just to make sure that we've got all the things, well, not enough of the things on record that we wanted to get out there, this is my reasoning for doing some of these shows. Not just to not leave you without something to listen to in the morning, but because there are so many things that I wanted to read into the record so I can refer back to them later on. And who knows how many of them will have blown up by the time we get back on the air live tomorrow. At any rate, we'll roll out what we've got for you with somewhat awkward transitions in between because it wasn't all done at the same time or read in one linear live recording. But please forgive all of that and enjoy today's show. Well, you're probably not going to believe this, but as it turns out, Trump and his entire administration are a bunch of dirty liars and thieves. I don't know if you were aware of this, but I didn't want to leave this one laying around for too long. The AP reports via Matthew Lee. You already know, of course, that Donald Trump took with him when he left the White House something like 15 boxes of documents, some of which were classified, and simply made off with them in violation of the Presidential Records Act. You probably know, of course, also that Donald Trump at some point forgot to log all of his phone calls for January 6th, leading to a 7.5-hour gap in his day. No one, of course, believes that he stayed off the telephone for that long. And there's already proof on the record of phone calls he made during that time. But now it turns out there's something else missing. Not just the 15 boxes of documents, not just 7.5 hours of call logs. But, as the AP reports, the State Department says that the White House gift records for both Trump and Pence are missing. I can't believe it. Where could they have gone? Well, of course, in all likelihood, they were just never created because if you don't have records, if you don't record the gifts you get, then they can't get you for taking the gifts. You see? I'm smart that way. I don't know if that's what happened, but here's the story. The State Department says it is unable to compile a complete and accurate. It's unable to. It's complete to the extent we're able to do it. It's interesting that they finally own up to this language, but the State Department, I guess, is the reason why you have a clearer message. Unable to compile a complete and accurate accounting of gifts presented to former President Donald Trump and other U.S. officials by foreign governments during Trump's final year in office, citing data missing from the White House. Or rather, citing missing data from the White House. I reversed those two words, but it works just the same. In a report to be published in the Federal Register next week, that'd be now, the department says the executive office of the president did not submit information about gifts received by Trump and his family from foreign leaders in 2020. They're just foreign emoluments. I mean, come on. What's the big deal? There were no consequences for failing to report domestic emoluments, or for that matter, foreign emoluments from his hotel. So why not just do it again? No one has been able to prove to me that there's consequence for doing it, so why not? These are nice items. Let's just take them. Well, it also says that the General Services Administration, no friend to Donald Trump and his emoluments business, I assure you, the General Services Administration didn't submit information about gifts given to former Vice President Mike Pence and White House staffers that year. The State Department said it sought the missing information from the National Archives and Records Administration. I can't believe they don't have it. And the General Services Administration, of course, but was told that, quote, potentially relevant records, unquote, are not available because of access restrictions related to retired records. I'm not sure what that's about, but I'm not sure it matters. The State Department's Office of Protocol reported the situation in footnotes to a partial list of gifts received by U.S. officials in 2020. The office publishes such lists annually, in part to what? To guard against potential conflicts of interest. But to hell with that. Who cares? A preview of the 2020 report was posted on the Federal Register website on last Friday, ahead of its formal publication on Monday. The report notes that the lack of gift information could be related to internal oversights as the protocol office neglected to, quote, submit the request for data to all reporting agencies prior to January 20th, 2021, when the Trump administration ended and the Biden administration began. No one has ever written it down, you see, that the administration switch over on January 20th, and so they just weren't prepared, or else maybe there was an insurrection going on and they couldn't believe that no one was being arrested for it, and in their astonishment never thought to ask about the gifts that they had received in the prior year. Let's see. However, it was also noted that there had been a, quote, lack of adequate record keeping pertaining to diplomatic gifts between January 20th, 2017, which I don't think there anything in particular changed or happened on that day. And then, of course, January 20th, 2021. So this is a weird gap that goes from January 20th, 2017 to January 20th, 2021. And no one can explain exactly what happened to all the record keeping at that point. That's not, of course, the way the AP puts it. They say there is a lack of adequate record keeping pertaining to diplomatic gifts between January 20th, 2017. They actually say that part. When Trump took office. Oh, is that it? And his departure from the White House 4 years later. But in essence, the AP does in fact say there's this weird lack of adequate record keeping pertaining to gifts that are given to the President of the United States, starting on some random date and ending on another random date, encompassing the entirety of the Trump administration. I cannot explain it. The State Department report comes as House lawmakers have opened an investigation. Do you think we should do this? Into reports that Trump had taken boxes of classified materials with him to his Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida after leaving last year. They're never going to get around to the towels and ashtrays, I guess. The National Archives and Records Administration has asked the Justice Department to look into the matter, but we don't. I hate when they refer matters to the Justice Department. It's so worrisome. The House panel investigating the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, meanwhile, has identified an almost 8-hour gap in official White House records. It was nice of them to mention this. The records of Trump's phone calls as the violence unfolded and his supporters stormed the building, according to two people familiar with the probe and everybody in the world who's read the news. Regarding the 2020 gifts, the department said It had made attempts to collect the required data from the current authoritative sources, but it has confirmed that potentially relevant records are not available to the State Department's Office of the Chief of Protocol under applicable process rules for retired records of the Executive Office of the President and the Office of the Vice President. As a result, the data required to fully compile a complete listing for 2020 is unavailable, it said. Like, that's it. If the president doesn't tell you before he leaves office, well, then you should wait until after he leaves office. But then if he doesn't tell you after he leaves office, then he doesn't have to tell you. So what do you think someone like Donald Trump is going to do? During his time in office, he won't tell you, but you can't prosecute a sitting president for things like that, or things like anything, really. So you'll simply have to wait until he's out of office, at which point you're not allowed to ask. This is a great system. I can't believe we haven't exploited this before. This is fantastic. I will say this is very esoteric knowledge. You really have to know where the bodies are buried to turn this up. The one thing that Donald Trump appears to have studied on how government works is there a loophole by which I could steal massive amounts of loot from foreign governments, never report it, and never have to report it? There is? I would like to read about that. Bring me, please, the fabric swatches and any dirt you want to make up about Joe Biden and the Gorilla Channel footage, if you will, please. And then also the P-tape, if you've got that. And any information you have about how I can steal gifts from other countries. Gift records, I guess we might as well read the conclusion of the report, because why not? We got nothing else to do with our time. Gift records for Trump administration officials such as former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former Defense Secretary Mark Esper, and former Central Intelligence Agency Chief Gina Haspel are included in the limited 2020 report, as are records for other senior diplomats, Pentagon, and CIA officials. I guess the word went out very clearly. You will not be able to get away with this. I am the one that wants to get away with this. You're going to have to let me. And if you're good, who knows? Maybe he figured I'll steal a couple of the things you guys want and then slip them to you on the side if you keep your mouth shut about how I'm stealing them now. I don't know what else to tell you. Emoluments is still the original and worst of his constitutional violations. I mean, it was the first one. It was the first one he did. Started on day one. He was already in violation of the Emoluments Clause from owning the hotel. And of course, it was the General Records or General Services Administration that engineered that disaster. And what do you know? They've engineered another one, and I guess you should start checking out whether top officials at the GSA have paid off their mortgage or baseball season tickets for the Nationals or anything like that. Country club memberships, for instance, in the last couple of months. I'd be curious to find out. Armando just had a heart attack hearing this. I'm sorry to break it to you, Armando, but yeah. You've been screaming about emoluments since forever with Trump, and this has got to be as frustrating as hell. But I can't believe it. Is all I can say. Except, of course, I can believe it. He's totally guilty, and we all know it. To hell with the innocent until proven guilty. We don't need it anymore. We're finished with that. We could say, you're Donald Trump you're talking about. You don't need to prove anything. He'll prove it for you. He'll tell you straight to your face that he stole that stuff. Let's just ask. How about some news from the rogue province, the breakaway province of Florida? Don't tell the Russians that it's a breakaway province. They'll try and invade it. This is an interesting piece from, just the other day, Wednesday. False election claims dominate party for Trump and allies at Mar-a-Lago, frequently known as Perv-a-Lago, perhaps now Groom-a-Lago might be a nickname you want to attach to it. This is from the Washington Post the other day. Josh Dawsey writing up the story of the election denial gathering that took place at Perv-a-Lago. Apparently, at some point, they had a slightly different headline to it and then realized, I guess they got, I saw them get some criticism for it on Twitter. People were wondering, apparently it used to be 2020 election claims dominate lively night at Trump's Mar-a-Lago, for Trump's allies at Mar-a-Lago, and I guess they got rid of the lively thing and went with false election claims dominate party for Trump. Much better. And I don't know who wrote the headline, but I don't think anybody really suspects that Josh Dawsey, wanted to play down the significance of what was going on there and the role of false election claims in it. So who knows? Anyway, they've responded to the criticism and changed the headline. Here's the story. Former President Donald Trump and a coterie of his top allies, donors, and paying club members gathered at his palatial beachfront club Tuesday night for a reunion of sorts to sip Trump-branded wine, snack on an amuse-bouche of fried shrimp and pastry-wrapped hot dogs, because that's all class, on the Mar-a-Lago patio, and most importantly, relitigate parts of the 2020 election that he lost 17 months ago. The fraud fete on a sweltering spring night showed how much Trump and the ecosphere around him remain focused on the last election and his false claims of fraud, and how he now inhabits a cosseted club life where he is the roundly cheered and rarely challenged star who everyone pays to see. It's his total fantasy life now. As he traversed the club, he repeatedly asked guests and members about fraud in certain states and offered vague claims of explosive findings that he said were still to come. So even, I'm sure there's like guests there for dinner, and he's approaching them. What do you think about the fraud? What about the fraud in Michigan? What'd you think about that? I don't know. I just want the prime rib. Shut up. Leave me alone. Everyone wants to engage him, but I'm sure they're like rolling their eyes about this stuff. Anyway, the occasion for the gathering, the debut of a 42-minute film, probably using the term loosely here, called Rigged, the Zuckerberg-funded plot to defeat Donald Trump. I laugh in the middle of it. I probably should have waited to get to the dramatic music, but now I'll just play the Zuckerberg-funded plot. I don't think anybody has mentioned that one to me, the Zuckerberg-funded plot. I mean, everyone else out here in the real world looked at it as though Zuckerberg was at least not taking his finger off the scale in being pro-Trump by providing, turning over the Facebook platform to their weirdos who were trying to manipulate the election through Facebook. But okay, whatever. And there's a kernel of truth out there somewhere that Zuckerberg did something and it didn't turn out well for Trump, and so therefore something. We'll get to that. A hyperbolic, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead here. The occasion was, of course, this stupid film from Citizens United president and Trump ally David Bossie that stars a range of Trump advisors and alleges Facebook helped Democrats by pouring money into states for voter turnout and education efforts. Okay, a hyperbolic poster advertising the movie with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg devilishly grabbing cash, no, subtext to that image, I'm sure, was perched by the pool for a cinematic sunset as guests strutted about clinking glasses. Nothing has animated Trump over the past 2 years like his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, and he seemed particularly ebullient before watching the film, saying he was looking forward to its screening more than Citizen Kane, Titanic, and Gone with the Wind. I can name 3 movies, and that's some collection. Would you like some Trump wine? A Mar-a-Lago employee cooed to every guest as they entered the patio, probably in an Eastern European accent. Guests walked past Trump's private quarters as they moved from one small crystal chandelier-packed ballroom for dinner through an outdoor concourse to another crystal chandelier-packed larger ballroom for the movie screening. A makeshift wall separated the makeshift movie theater from the ballroom dining area where employees cleaned up from the nightly dinner for the club's paying members. As guests strolled through, they posed for pictures with Trump, who grinned widely. Trump drew lusty standing applauses every time he walked in, and before and after every time he spoke, and made money from every guest there, of course. Trump's false claims about the election have unsettled American democracy and driven much of his party not to trust the results of 2020. They, at least in part, fueled the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, 2021. In part, by which I think he means 100%. But okay. It is part, just one large chunk of it. And they have been largely debunked, with even many Republicans urging him to move forward and focus on President Biden. At the gilded Mar-a-Lago, where an Air Force One model sat on a table and hundreds of photos and tributes to Trump hung on the wall, there was no talk of the January 6th Commission probing the pro-Trump mob that ransacked the Capitol after his false claims of fraud. No one challenged any of Trump's claims about the election. The outside world, where he has often struggled to break 40% in popularity, and his grip on the Republican Party has faded some, seemed planets away from the mangrove bushes, palm trees, and ostentatiously gold rooms of Mar-a-Lago. Some of the people here say, oh, it's not Trump. Some of the people here say, we shouldn't be talking about 2020, said Bossy, the convener of the evening. I think it's vital that we do. If we don't prove what happened in 2020, and they haven't, how can we stop it from happening again? And of course, if they, fail to prove it, how can we stop them from trying to do what they did in 2020 again, except this time with perhaps more violence? But, we don't look backward. A who's who of prominent advisors and election deniers and prominent challengers in his campaign is that right? Prominent challengers in his campaign to overturn the 2020 election. Challengers? Who's who of prominent advisors and election deniers and prominent challengers in his campaign to overturn the 2020 election gathered for the affair, along with random donors at the club for another event, who spilled in some hangers-on and Washington operatives looking for business and candidates seeking his endorsement or help. Carrie Lake, a prominent Republican candidate for Arizona governor and supporter of Trump's claims, approached reporters and called the mainstream media the enemy of the people, urging them to quit and expose their owners. There was lawyer Cleta Mitchell, who closely worked with Trump's White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to push fraud claims after the 2020 election and appeared with Trump on the call in which he demanded Georgia's elections officials, quote, find votes to overturn the results. That is now under criminal investigation in Georgia. Michael Gableman, the retired Wisconsin Supreme Court justice who oversaw a criticized voter audit in that state, appeared in person and on film. Michael, you've been unbelievable, Trump said, thanking Gableman and bringing applause. By the way, this story came to my attention thanks to a tweet from Karen Tumulty, who pulled that particular quote out. Michael, you've been unbelievable, Trump said. Why, yes, he has, she says. And we'll get back to why she says that about Gableman a little later. I know I've mentioned his widely criticized audit up in Wisconsin a few times before, and her tweet thread leads us to a Washington Post discussion of just what that is all about and what its problems are. But Michael, you've been unbelievable. Guests swelled to greet Gableman. His inquiry has made little pretense of neutrality and was led by figures who have shown allegiance to Trump or embraced false claims of fraud, and its findings were criticized. When Peter Navarro, the former Trump advisor who posited some of the most extreme theories on overturning the election and is now under contempt proceedings by the House of Representatives, barreled into the room late, longtime Trump advisor Corey Lewandowski hollered out, "Doctor," and embraced him. Oh, that vote, or Oh, that vote. I'm not certain how he means to say this, but oh, that vote. Navarro said dismissively of the contempt proceedings against him as he walked into the ballroom for the screening before all other guests, seeming a man without a care in the world. Trump spoke both at the dinner and before the premiere, repeatedly telling the crowd that Russia would not have invaded Ukraine if he was president, that there would be fewer civilian deaths, and that inflation and gas prices would be lower if the election was not, quote, rigged. It just would never have happened, or rather, in his voice, it just would never have happened, he said, after describing grim civilian deaths in Ukraine that he had seen on television, as he sees everything, and saying the rigged election fueled it. He attacked Republicans for not doing enough to help him on the election results and ticked through a number of theories about the election and claims about various states, such as Wisconsin and Arizona. Trump promised that next week the crowd would see levels of ballot harvesting they never thought possible. As part of a report from an outside group, it was unclear what he meant, but he said his advisors had been working with the project. He credited Susie Wiles, who runs his PAC, and Reince Priebus, his former chief of staff, for working on the issue, among others. When he came to the second room, he gave a similar but shorter speech to largely the same audience, because he has no idea where he is or what he's doing. Anyway, the video shows how a foundation partially run by Zuckerberg funded efforts that were designed to drive up turnout and help with coronavirus protections related to the election. It does not accuse Zuckerberg of doing anything illegal, just, somehow greedily being Jewish and liking money, apparently, but says instead that he packed his foundation with prominent partisan Democrats, giving examples. Zuckerbucks, person after person on the film said, describing his money. Zuckerbucks. Not regular money. It's not green. It's Zuckerbucks. Something's wrong with it. Bossy and others said they were not attempting to litigate some of Trump's more incendiary theories, such as the falsehoods about Dominion voting machines. That's the one you can get sued for and lose, so they're not doing that one. Instead, they said, the film showed that much of the money from the Zuckerberg Foundation went to areas where Biden won. And turnout climbed in the 2020 election. In other words, the get out the vote effort got out the vote. So, look out. More dramatic news coming. How nefarious. The movie repeatedly referenced how the coronavirus led state officials to change voting laws. Yes, remember we were all worried about standing in line together and getting inside the polling places and breathing on one another? They tried to avoid having that become a super spreader event. How strange. Bossy was the main MC of the video. He said the budget for the film was about $500,000, which basically means he stole about $500,000. Zuckerberg said in a statement last week to Fox News through a spokesperson, when our nation's election infrastructure faced unprecedented challenges in 2020 due to the pandemic, and the federal government failed to provide adequate funds to allow states and localities to conduct elections, Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan, stepped up to close that funding gap with two independent nonprofit organizations to help the American people vote. Oh, no. How terrible. Trump in the film alleged that Zuckerberg was afraid of his employees and people on the left. Why? I'm not sure. Not certain where that goes. Trump once bragged about having a close relationship with Zuckerberg, who has received considerable criticism from the left for not doing more to temper Trump's rhetoric on Facebook, and even had him for dinner at the White House. Among those starring in the project and attacking Zuckerberg, Senator Ted Cruz, who lost to Trump in a vicious 2016 primary in which Trump insulted his wife's appearance, and former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, about which there's nothing said, which I think is kind of funny. The evening marked a homecoming of sorts for some Trump aides who angled to see the boss and greet one another, such as former spokesman Hogan Gidley, with a caramel tan, who said he was at Mar-a-Lago for the first time in a year. He now that's supposed to distance him from Trump, but, he now works on, quote, election integrity for a Trump-related group. So still a hanger-on. Now, this is interesting. Who else was there? How does she do it? Hope Hicks was there. But mind you, they note here, Hope Hicks, one of Trump's longest-serving advisors, who reportedly broke with him over election fraud claims in 2020 and resigned before he left office, was present for the event, sitting near the front of the ballroom and chatting with Priebus and hugging others. Okay, I mean, that's a great big break. The only reason you came back was for the screening of a film full of lies about voter fraud. Okay. Trump credited her from the podium. We love Hope. We love Hope. I love her. She steams my pants. And I mean that in the most literal way. We love Hope, he said. She may have said that too. Hicks has lobbied Trump to endorse David McCormick, a Senate candidate she's working for in Pennsylvania, and has partially returned to his orbit because she can't stay away, apparently. She declined to speak on the record. And it was real. I mean, I guess she's back in his orbit because McCormick hired her because he thought that she would be able to garner Trump's endorsement for him if she was working for him. And she, no doubt, did nothing to dissuade him from believing that and has not yet been able to deliver the endorsement. So there she is, trying to get it done. Kellyanne Conway, who starred in the movie, stood near the front of the ballroom and playfully ribbed other Trump advisors about how they might come off negatively in her upcoming book, scheduled to be released this spring. A tickle, she said to one, promising him the ribbing would be gentle. Should I curtsy, she said, walking into the premiere before doing so. Not really sure why anyone would curtsy in that situation, but go ahead. Go for it. I don't know. Curtsy. Okay. Conway and Priebus stood around afterward and could be overheard discussing who shivved who in the Trump White House. It could be scorched earth, baby, Bossy said with a laugh of her book. Lewandowski, who was ousted temporarily from Trump's orbit after allegations of inappropriate conduct from a Trump donor last year, engaged in fiery television hits from the back of the ballroom with Newsmax and Stephen K. G.B. Bannon's podcast, and was greeted warmly by Trump and others. Devin Nunes dared to show his face. Devin Nunes, the CEO of the struggling Truth Social, Trump's new social media platform, walked through the room and was later spotted on the patio with Priebus. Christina Bobb, the One America News anchor who has pushed some of Trump's claims and regularly talked to Trump, mingled with guests without a camera. Trump repeatedly signaled to the crowd he might run for president again, and they whooped and hollered. We'll make America great again, he said. Bossy repeatedly introduced him as the 45th and 47th president of the United States. As the movie ended, Trump greeted throngs of guests who waited for him on a red rope line and walked the few steps to his quarters, lumbered in, his Secret Service retinue in tow, still pretending to be president. Ah, how sad. Anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting news from down in Perva-Lago. Florida kind of a hot spot of breakaway activity and sedition, still, even today. So I mentioned to you that there was also some other possibly exciting news from the breakaway region down in Florida. And I thought I might double back and fill that in, even though it really doesn't have anything in particular to do with Trump. And maybe later we'll get back to filling in the blanks about Wisconsin and Mike Gableman, who's been unbelievable. And we'll figure out exactly why he's been so unbelievable. But I thought I would throw this into the mix. This is interesting and different. And I don't really know, exactly what was going on here, but it seemed like an interesting and intriguing story. Anyway, Mike DeForest is the reporter here. The News 6, I don't know what News 6 is. But, down in Florida, I guess the News 6 investigative reporter who's been working on a story and has, as a result, generated a story of his own that he's at the center of, not in a bad way, but in a good way. This is, I didn't know he was doing this, and I'm not sure where he was going with it, but it becomes kind of clear. But he tweeted the other day, middle of last week, would have been Tuesday, April 5th, new. Some have asked how News 6 discovered the paper trail showing that Governor Ron DeSantis delayed releasing financial records of Matt Gaetz' associate Halsey Beshears. I don't really recall hearing much about Halsey Beshears and what this person was all about, but we are promised in the first tweet here, here's a thread with receipts, and it's one of 21 tweets, so, this could get involved and interesting. And in fact, it does. So Mike DeForest, our reporter here, continues by saying, following a Politico report linking Halsey Beshears to the Matt Gaetz investigation in April of 2021, I submitted a public records request with the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation seeking the former secretary's expense reports. I guess Halsey Beshear is the former secretary of who knows what. I guess we should probably look that up along the way so that I have a better sense of who we're talking about. But I'll note again for the record that this is back in April of 21. He starts looking into this. The former secretary of the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, the department of whom he made this request. That probably should have been easier to figure out. But let me take a look at the Wikipedia on Halsey here so that I can get a better sense of what's going on. Let's see. Republican from Florida, obviously, served as secretary of the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation from January of 2019 to January of 2021. Previously a member of the Florida House of Representatives, representing parts of the Florida Panhandle from 2012 until his appointment as DBPR secretary. So a neighbor, politically speaking, of Matt Gaetz, right? Beshear's family moved to Monticello, Florida. Is that, a city in Jefferson County? Just wondering, like not the actual, not Thomas Jefferson's house, but, just wondering if they called their mansion Monticello or something like that. Anyway, not all that. We don't really have to look at this. I guess I was going to look and see whether there was anything about his controversial connection, if any, to Matt Gaetz here, but I'm not seeing it. So, although who knows, maybe I'm skipping right over it. All right. Well, at any rate, we'll read through the thread. As I recall, they make some of the connection for us, but I thought I might try and find a different source on that. So anyway, Mike DeForest continues. Following a Politico report linking Beshears to Gaetz, in April 2021, I submitted a public records request with the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation seeking the former secretary's expense reports. That, I guess, is the important thing. And screen grab of the very formal-looking letter making the request is here. That's the receipt. And the request is for all billing statements for credit cards issued by the state of Florida to former Secretary Halsey Beshears detailing purchases made between January 1st, 2019 through February 1st, 2020. All billing statements, all expense reports, et cetera, et cetera. Just basically looking to find out how was he spending official money during the time that he is in some way connected to Matt Gaetz, who was spending money on trafficking underage sex partners. Anyway, DBPR usually responds quickly to records requests for contractor complaints and such, so I was puzzled when my wait for Beshear's records hit 1 month. I requested an appointment to view them in person, as Florida law allows. No response. And again, here, more receipts, another letter saying, If your agency is having difficulty producing copies for us, please let me know the earliest time we can schedule an appointment to visit your Tallahassee office to view these records. We understand the statute allows your agency to collect a reasonable fee for supervision during that in-person viewing, which is kind of cheesy, but I guess it's a real thing. Okay, continuing on with the thread. After 3 months and 9 ignored emails, we published this article about DBPR withholding Bashir's records. And there's a article linked here. Coincidentally or not, they finally arrived after 1 week, or arrived 1 week later. Okay. I don't know, somehow misread that sentence, but I think I was distracted by the entirely fake-looking Matt Gaetz photo here. He's just so Max Headroom looking in this picture. But this published over at Click Orlando, which I don't know which paper or consortium of papers this represents, but state withholds spending records of Matt Gaetz associate Halsey Bashir. I'll open it up anyway and see if there's any more information about the connection between the two of them. Bashir's unexpectedly resigned from his position in January of 2021, citing health issues. States so the agency has failed to produce financial documents related to its former secretary following a public records request submitted by News 6 nearly 3 months ago. Has not explained why spending records have not yet been released. The agency previously indicated the request was undergoing a legal review, but it is unclear why such a review is necessary and whether it is complete. Let's see. He was, of course, appointed by Ron DeSantis, who called him a champion for deregulation. The unexpected resignation cited health issues in January of 2021. According to Politico, Bashir's traveled to the Bahamas, here we are, with Congressman Matt Gaetz in September of 2018, just months before Bashir's was named DBPR secretary. At the time, Bashir's was serving in the Florida legislature. That Bahamas trip is now being scrutinized by federal investigators as part of its probe into possible sex trafficking, according to CBS News. Gaetz and Bashir's have not been charged with any crimes. Bashir's did not immediately respond to emails from News 6 seeking comment for the story. You know, all of that kind of stuff follows. Gaetz repeatedly denies any wrongdoing. The two Republicans from Florida's Panhandle served together in the Florida House of Representatives prior to Gaetz being elected to Congress in 2016. And was it him in the Florida legislature who used to have the game, like the game with points for which staffers and lobbyists you had sex with? So, you know, they might have been up to something as between the two of them back in those days. So let's see. News 6 submitted a public records request to DBPR in April seeking financial statements for credit cards and other spending accounts assigned to Bashir's while he served as secretary. Such financial documents are considered public records under Florida law and must be made available to any citizen who requests to see them. There's no indication that Bashir's improperly used state money, and News 6 has not yet confirmed whether Bashir's ever had access to state-issued credit cards or spending accounts. News organizations do, though, routinely request financial records from the government to see how taxpayer funds are spent. Florida law doesn't specify how quickly government officials have to produce such public records, but state agencies are required to respond to such requests in good faith, according to Florida's Government in the Sunshine Manual. After acknowledging the records request from News 6 for the former secretary's financial records on April 15th, the agency has failed to respond to 9 email messages, 9 times, as they say, to email messages from News 6 seeking information about when the records will be released, including the most recent, sent on July 7th, calls to not when unanswered, etc., etc. You know how that goes. Okay, now back to the thread. Mike DeForest continues. The 61 pages of Bashir's expense reports appeared routine, mostly detailing agency-related travel within the state. There were 25 redacted account numbers, as Florida law requires. Here are some examples, and there's a couple of pages screenshotted here, nothing remarkable. But DeForest continues, why did it take 3 months to produce the records? There has been chatter since Senator Rick Scott was governor that some, quote, high-profile requests might be sent to the governor for review. This is Freedom of Information Act style requests. Remember, public records, right? Some high-profile ones that get sent to the governor to review. Gee whiz, I'm sure neither Rick Scott nor Ron DeSantis would abuse that. Anyway, so in July, I sent this new records request to the office of Governor Ron DeSantis. And this is an interesting one. This time basically asking for any records of the fact that you might be holding on to these records I've been requesting. On April 15th, 2021, at 11:06 a.m. EST, that's a little, more detail than we really need, Mike DeForest with WKMG-TV Orlando submitted a public records request via email to the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, seeking expense reports and credit card/spending account billing statements for former Secretary Halsey Beshears, pursuant to Article 1, Section 24 of the Florida Constitution and Chapter 119 of FS, Florida statutes, I guess. We are requesting copies of all written communications, including email and text message communications, in the possession of the Executive Office of the Governor, related to the April 15th, 21 WKMG public records request submitted to DBPR. This request includes internal communications within the Executive Office of the Governor and communications between the Executive Office of the Governor personnel and outside parties. We are seeking such public records created on or after April 15th, 2021. Very clever of him. 4 months later, Governor DeSantis' staff responded, claiming there were no responsive records. In other words, they apparently had nothing showing my DBPR request went through their office. Okay, maybe it didn't. Maybe my theory was wrong? Question mark? Yes, maybe. So, in November, I submitted another records request to DBPR seeking all emails containing my last name, News 6's TV station call letters, or Beshears. I figured that might reveal how my request traveled through DBPR. In March, 3+ months later, DBPR produced this internal email. It confirms DBPR compiled a portion of Beshears' financial records less than 6 hours after I first requested them in April of 2021. 6 hours, that's pretty responsive. So what happened? And here's the email. Let's see. All right. It is from Sally Huggins, whoever that is, to Eric Thiele or Thiele, Thiele. Subject, public records request. And it says, Eric, just FYI, I have started on this. I have a report of travel already from Flair. It's Flair. I'm not certain what that. Florida Air, I guess. At BPR, the airport, maybe. I don't know. And Diana Blue is pulling a P-card report. Okay. Lynn said this wasn't an urgent need to get done today or tomorrow, just need to respond probably next week. Thanks, Sally. In other words, a totally routine and timely response. Now, Mike DeForest continues, DBPR also produced daily media reports documenting the agency's contacts with news organizations. This shows my records request was routed to Finance the day it was received on April 15th, 2021. So, all good so far. 15 days later, my request was, quote, under review by DBPR's chief of staff. The media logs reveal some public records were given to news organizations the very same day they were requested, but not mine. On May 4th, 2021, my records were placed, quote, with Kim for review. That's in the agency response block for, here's what the request is, and we know what the requests are, all the billing statements and financial reports, and agency response with Kim for review. They remained with Kim for 2+ months until at least July 7th, 2021. Who is Kim? Great question. says Mike. Last month, I sent an email to DBPR asking for Kim's last name and job title. No response. So I sent another message 5 days later. And here it is. Pardon this obscure question. Obviously, it's related to the PRR your agency provided me earlier today. On the DBPR daily media call log under agency response, when there is a note indicating with Kim for review, what is Kim's last name and what is Kim's official government title? Just who is this Kim person? Well, DBPR responded the next day, but did not answer my specific questions seeking Kim's last name and title. So I wrote back a third time. Sorry, I missed this on Thursday. This is the response. Good morning, Mike. Sorry I missed this on Thursday. Kim was the point of contact for the legal review of public records. Yeah, right. I know that what you're telling me is they're with Kim for review. Who's Kim? The person who's reviewing them. Yeah, not responsive. Meanwhile, to force DBPR to identify Kim, I sent this very creative records request, and it's a great thing to know your way around records request. I don't know what the procedures, things that, very often they'll tell you, we have nothing that's responsive to your request. You do. Sometimes they engineer the searches so that there's nothing responsive. Or sometimes they don't. It's just you haven't really used the right search terms. Just like sometimes you Google for something you know exists, it doesn't come up. You modify your Google request. There we go. Now that was the term I needed in order to turn this thing up. But this is also, for me, reminiscent of what we heard the other day about the White House call logs being complete. The White House call logs from January 6th, right? No, they're not comprehensive and inclusive of all the calls that were made, but they are complete in the sense that we've stopped working on them. Similarly here, sometimes you got to get creative in the way you make your records requests so that it gets around their attempts to engineer things so that you come up with no records. Now remember, he asked, who is... it was before, what was he asking when he asked for, and nothing came up? Yeah, that was, I guess a few tweets back. But I love that one too, asking, well, who's Kim? Kim's the person who's holding up your records. Why is she doing that? Why is she entitled to do that? So anyway, meanwhile, to force DBPR to identify Kim, I sent this very creative records request seeking the most recent email authored by Kim. I hoped such an email might include her full name and title. That's a good one. I'm curious if there's anything more to this very verbose request than the really good explanation. Yeah, all right. I think that's basically it, although it's clear that he has some real suspicions about this stuff from the lengthy way in which he posed his request. But basically the gist of it is, send me her last non-exempt email, which usually has that signature block at the bottom. My ploy apparently worked. 12 days after I first asked, DBPR identified Kim as an administrative assistant for Governor Ron DeSantis. We finally had a paper trail confirming Beshears' records were compiled in days and then sent to the governor, where I guess they just sat, for 2+ months. Aha. So there you go. What else is attached here? Here's the responsive email. Good afternoon, Mike. Our sincere apologies for the delay as we've had a busy session. Kim Bain, B-A-N-E, is an analyst and administrative assistant with the Executive Office of the Governor. So now we know. On March 22nd, I sent these questions to Governor Ron DeSantis' press office. No response. I sent them again on March 23rd. No response. I sent them again on March 24th. No response. What are the questions? Why would the Executive Office of the Governor, EOG, get involved in a routine public records request submitted with another agency? Under what criteria does EOG review another agency's public records requests prior to release? if I request a copy of my barber's cosmetology license with DBPR, would the Executive Office of the Governor need to review it? If not, what triggers an EOG review? Is there a written or unwritten policy requiring state agencies to forward, quote, high-profile public records requests to EOG for secondary review? Was WKMG-TV's public records request separately reviewed by the EOG specifically because it involved Mr. Bashir's? If so, why? And why did it take EOG 2 months to review 61 pages of documents containing minimal text? Does EOG consider this review to be in good faith? All good questions. So on March 28th, I sent the same questions to Kim, along with this summary. The next day, I shared our publication's headline with her. No response. And remember, the headline was going to be, what? State withholds spending records of Matt Gaetz associate Halsey Bashir's. No response, though. Let me see. This is a rather lengthy explanation that he sends to Kim. And, I don't know that there's necessarily anything to be gained by reading through the letter. We've already read through most of the summary. The next day, Governor DeSantis's press office finally responded with this statement, more than a week after I first contacted them. And here it goes. Let's see. What do we have here? WKMG-TV inquiry for upcoming story. And the response is, I have a response for you regarding your inquiry. I am also happy to be a point of contact on these matters and others moving forward. You have characterized the timeline of this request according to your own opinion. Sometimes we can deliver records requests in a shorter period of time, but sometimes our office needs more time to review a request. The quantity of text involved in a request is not always directly proportional to the time needed in the review process. In accordance with the governor's duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, the Executive Office of the Governor may review the record to ensure the accuracy and correctness of the record production. The Executive Office of Governor strives to process records for production as quickly as possible, given its limited resources and the volume and complexity of all the records requests that it receives. Additionally, under the Florida Constitution, the governor has supervisory authority over the executive departments and agencies that report to him. In light of this authority, it is entirely appropriate for the Executive Office of the Governor to review the records of a subordinate department or agency where such department or agency determines that the Executive Office of the Governor may have an equity in the record, e.g., because the record includes communications with the Executive Office of the Governor, because the record concerns the governor, or because there is reason to believe that the governor may be asked about information in the record. As to your request for all written communications related to the 4/15/21 public records request submitted to DBPR, we note that the DBPR records themselves are not responsive to this request, and we do not have any responsive records at EOG. Lastly, we ask that you please be more respectful of our office staff in your future communications. You sent an extremely long and aggressively worded essay to Kim Bain, an administrative staffer with our office, which included several self-assigned imperatives, including a deadline. Your requests will continue to be addressed by the appropriate division in the due course of business, together and in order with all other media and public records requests that we receive. Now, I guess we should have gone back and read that thing to see how super aggressive it was. But remember, he's been waiting months. I sent follow-up questions to Governor DeSantis' press office asking how its position squares with page 168 of the Florida Government in the Sunshine Manual, published by who? Oh, the Attorney General, Ashley Moody, and the Florida FAF, the Florida First Amendment Foundation. Okay. No response, of course. Links to the manual are provided. By then, I had contacted Open Government Act advocates at Florida, First Amendment Foundation, and the Florida Center for Government Accountability. Their legal concerns about the delay caused by DeSantis' secondary review of public records can be found here in a Click Orlando News article. And is that the same one as we saw before? Let's see. A slightly different headline here, so it might be a different piece. DeSantis staff delayed release of Gates associate Halsey Bashir's spending records, as opposed to the first one, which was state withholds spending records of Matt Gates associate Halsey Bashir's. But, I'm sure two similarly themed pieces. Very interesting. And I think that's actually the end of the thread. And I just found that very interesting. We'll see whether anything develops out of it. Again, we don't know that Halsey Bashir's did anything at all with state money in hanging out in the Bahamas with Matt Gaetz. But if anything's going to create the appearance that might have happened, it would be Ron DeSantis just, for some reason, having an administrative assistant pluck this routine records request out of thin air and hold it with her for review for 2+ months, and then get all huffy when you were asking, so what were you even doing? I mean, apparently you said there was no extra responsive documents. Why did you hold it for 2 months? How dare you ask me? And I don't know. I mean, I guess it could lead somewhere. It might not. I wouldn't put it past Ron DeSantis to just say, why don't we grab this one and hold on to it? There's nothing here. There's no there, but let's hold on to it so that they get suspicious and start accusing us of stuff. And then we'll release the things and we'll be like, there you go. There's nothing there. And they'll keep digging because they'll think that we spent the 2 months scrubbing the record and there's really nothing there. And we'll just send them on a wild goose chase. And that'll be time that these investigative reporters don't have to investigate us for things that we actually did do. I don't know. I just thought it was pretty interesting, and pretty interesting to see the receipts for it. And a great story about how to use records requests, if nothing else, to generate a story about how these people are, doing their level best to prevent the free press from figuring out what the hell's going on with any of these weird stories. And they did a really good job in nailing down the governor's hand in all of this. Even if it does turn out that it was nothing but misdirection, that's a story now, too. The governor does this stuff to try to screw with news organizations because, I don't know, he hates freedom, is what the Republicans used to say about all Democrats who did anything. So why not go ahead and say the same about them? I want to turn back now to the other subject that Karen Tumulty included in her tweet thread when she was tweeting about, remember way back when we were talking about the party going on at Mar-a-Lago, and how, what's his name, Michael Gableman had showed up at the party because he was in the film about the false election rigging claims. And Trump said that he had been so unbelievable. And no, yes, he really has been unbelievable. What exactly did that mean? She's pointing here to an editorial board, an editorial by the editorial board, otherwise unsigned, I guess, that ran back on March 6th of this year, under the headline, of course, being an opinion. The Wisconsin GOP's investigation into the 2020 election is a farce. It's time to abandon it. And I've been seeing all sorts of commentary along the way from people in Wisconsin, screaming into the void, essentially on Twitter, about how ridiculous their investigations were and what a complete idiot they used to have on the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. And I'm sure they were hoping to buy credibility for their stupid false claims by putting a former Supreme Court justice in charge. But remember, they're elected Supreme Court justices there. So you're talking about a politician, and a Republican politician at that, being put in charge of a fake investigation of something that didn't happen. So what are you really going to think you're going to get out of that? A lot of focus, a lot of attention. We all paid closer attention, I think, to the Arizona fake audit, the Cyber Ninjas fake audit. And we knew that Wisconsin's fake audit had been inspired by the Arizona fake audit, but we didn't pay as much national attention to it. So let's get a little taste of what the editorial board at the Washington Post thought of that would move them to title it a farce and call for its abandonment. Nonetheless, of course, Michael Gaberman did not abandon it and instead is now starring in films about it and showing up at Mar-a-Lago to curry favor with Donald Trump over it. The editorial reads this way: the Republicans behind Wisconsin's investigation into the 2020 election have made little effort to hide their intentions. Many of those supporting the investigation have connections to the Trump campaign, so not great, right, in terms of its neutrality and dependability. And yet, that's what they were going for. Leading the investigation is former Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Michael Gableman. No neutral arbiter, but rather a man who told a group of supporters of former President Donald Trump in November 2020 that the election had been stolen. Asked last week if he had voted for Mr. Trump, he proudly declared, "You bet I did." No surprise, then, that the 136-page draft report released last week by Mr. Gableman was full of debunked claims of misdeeds, accompanied by Mr. Gableman's suggestion to state lawmakers that they consider, quote, decertifying Wisconsin's 2020 election results. That ridiculous suggestion, made during a state assembly committee hearing, has no legal basis, which is sort of something you thought you wouldn't get from a former Supreme Court justice. But guess what? You get it that way anyway. So that ridiculous suggestion has no legal basis. Even Mr. Gableman conceded there would be no practical effect to such a move. Joe Biden is the president, and he can only be impeached or voted out of office. The antics of Wisconsin's taxpayer-funded commission would be laughable if they weren't so damaging to democracy, and of course taxpayer-funded on top of that. The report's baseless theories of election wrongdoing and false assertions of conspiracies seek to undermine voter confidence in elections and erode the legitimacy of those who won public office. Consider, for example, how the report framed the work of an elections-focused nonprofit, the Center for Tech and Civic Life, which provided private grants to local election administrations to help them deal with the complications of running an election during a pandemic. The report referred to 5 large Wisconsin cities that received funding as the Zuckerberg 5. Well, that definitely deserves dramatic music, right? It's the third time we've had to go to that today. I hope. Anyway, what if I edit these things together and put these in different shows? Oh, well, all right. I'll let you in behind the curtain. So that's it. If you accepted money from the Center for Tech and Civic Life to help administer an election so that people could vote during the pandemic and exercise their rights, you're now a member of the Zuckerberg 5. Facebook executive Mark Zuckerberg contributed to the nonprofit and likened the money to a form, money to a form of bribery. In fact, most of Wisconsin's counties received money from the nonprofit, and multiple lawsuits challenging the legality of the funding have been rejected in federal and state courts. But notice that what happened there. Most of the counties in Wisconsin got money from the nonprofit, but the ones that are Republican leaning and went Republican in the election, no problem there. It's the Zuckerberg 5. We're worried about the big cities. Beware those, as Rick Santorum used to say, blah people might live. Anyway, what's most troubling, there's more troubling than that. Most troubling about Mr. Gableman and his investigation is that he is far from alone. Republicans in multiple states have set up partisan reviews to relitigate the 2020 election. The common theme running through these efforts is that they aim to amplify and reinforce Mr. Trump's lies about the election being stolen from him. They also serve as pretense for Republicans who seek to restrict access to voting, or possibly even to overturn legitimate votes in future elections. Some Republicans in Wisconsin made clear they wanted nothing to do with Mr. Gableman and his continuing efforts. Handing authority to partisan politicians to determine if election fraud exists would be the end of our republic as we know it. Jim Steineke, the Assembly's Republican majority leader, who is not seeking re-election, so that's why he's brave enough to do this, wrote on Twitter. But Assembly Speaker Robin Voss, among the most powerful Republicans in the state, said that Mr. Gableman's work will continue. It's time for the Wisconsin GOP to end the charade of this investigation. More importantly, it should denounce the lies that are chipping away at the public's trust in America's elections. That's it. Short but sweet. I just thought that would be of some interest in explaining Karen Tumulty's quite apt comment about his being unbelievable in the strictest sense of the word.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, that is a wrap on the third of the Fakey Fake shows for this week. We'll be back with a live one, I hope, not to get on our feet tomorrow, Thursday, with Greg Dworkin back on the air with us to carry us all the way home. We'll see you then.